This new moon on May 26th/May 27th, depending on where in the world you reside, 2025, is in the sign of Gemini. And as is the usual with all new moons, it is conjunct the sun, which is also in Gemini. They're on top of one another. The sun and the moon then form a conjunction with the planet of Mercury, which is the planet that rules Gemini, that is at 2 degrees. So all of these guys are nice and cozy, and they're happy with being nice and cozy in this very cerebral, intellectual sign of Gemini. But that's not the only thing that's in your corner for this new moon. This new moon in Gemini then trines Pluto, that is in Aquarius, and then Pluto trines Saturn and Neptune, that is conjunct in Aries. So there is this beautiful blue triangle of harmony between all of these planets. Now, I don't feel that this reading would be complete if we didn't talk about the fact that Saturn has just recently switched from the sign of Pisces into the sign of Aries. This is a big deal because Saturn only changes signs every 2.5 years. And there is a false aspect square between Saturn, that is in Aries, and Jupiter, that is in Gemini. But I'll get into that in a second. We first need to talk a little bit about the different themes and the different flavor that Saturn will have now that it's moving from Pisces to Aries, because this is going to play a huge role really for the rest of the year. And this new moon is a pivotal turning point where we are creating a new beginning, but not so fast, because Saturn is the planet of structure and organization, which also requires limitation. Most of the time when we hear the word limitation, we're like, oh, that doesn't sound like very much fun. And it's not. However, limitation is also the crucible for creativity. When we decide to create something, it's to the exclusion of other options. For example, if you decide to write a book, it will be to the exclusion of other books. You will choose a theme, you'll choose a topic, perhaps a main character, and that book will be to the exclusion of other kinds of books that you could write or other kinds of creative activities that you could take. So Saturn, although it's not the most fun planet in the zodiac, it's also, though, one of the most necessary to get things done. Now, Saturn in Pisces was a rough trip for a lot of folks. So Saturn in Pisces, it makes us come to realization of subconscious influences that might be getting in our way. Saturn will part the mists of the subconscious to allow us to see our truth, to allow us to see what is really going on with our circumstances, with our beliefs, with our relationships, just below the surface. These are typically the things that we would prefer not to see. But instead of the mists revealing the Isle of Avalon, the mists for a lot of folks can feel like we just stepped into the upside down world. And the truth bearing that Saturn brings through Pisces is completely unfiltered. So a lot of the watery weight of the subconscious influences for a lot of us felt like a wet, weighted blanket laying on top of us. It felt very stagnant, and even if we came to these aha moments of what was going on below the surface, and we could see how we might be contributing to limiting factors that weren't very helpful, a lot of us didn't really know what to do with it. Or it felt like it was creating so much stagnation that we just really didn't have the energy or resources to overcome those obstacles. All of that changes as Saturn goes into Aries. Unlike Pisces, which is watery, Aries is fire. So it will reinvigorate our system. It's going to give us a bit of that gusto to burn off the stagnation, to dry things out a bit so reality doesn't feel like such a wet blanket. It will give us the invigoration to go the distance to acquire our dreams and to meet our aspirations. I always look at the gift of Aries as being teaching us about our sovereign self. Aries is very much about independence. It's one of its shadow things is the me first attitude. But when it's in balance, it honors the self. So all of the lessons, all of the excavation over the last 2.5 years of how we might have abandoned ourselves. And within that 2.5 years, we also had this north and south node pairing off between Libra and Aries, which gave us like 18 months of a lot of challenges and tension between the right of ourself and the right of our communities, the right of those that we're in relationship with. And many of us saw during that time endings in our personal relationships, our professional relationships, and a lot of us came to realizations on how we might be abandoning ourselves for the comfort of those around us. So all of these ways that we may have either consciously or subconsciously over-compromised ourselves are lessons that we can bring into Saturn and Aries. And now with this fire, we can actually do something about it. One of the tripping points about Saturn being in Pisces is taking the experiences of our past where we have been victimized in some way. Somebody has done us harm or betrayed us, or in some way they have wounded us. And taking that experience as playing the part of a victim and taking that so deeply within us that then it becomes part of our identity. When wounds become part of our identity and we are not only have experienced victimization, but now we are a victim, that is a very much more difficult mindset to heal from than acknowledging and honoring the past, acknowledging and honoring that experience, and being able to transmute that. Once it becomes part of our identity, and identity is the same thing as ego, it's the same thing as persona, it's the same thing as your thoughts. Once it becomes a part of how we see ourselves, that's a much more difficult thing to dismantle. So as Saturn goes into Aries and we are experiencing this firing up of our courage, our charisma, our gusto, our vitality, it's like the metal being smelted by a blacksmith. When they smelt metal, they are separating the impurities from the metal that they want to keep, such as gold. So we don't want to overfire it, because then that compromises our own integrity. It compromises the gold if you overfire it. However, we do need a little bit of that fire in order to be able to move through the fear, move through the doubt, and move through the things that may still be keeping us back that we haven't let go of, maybe because of a feeling of overwhelm, lethargy, and inertia. The people who may find this the most uncomfortable, however, are people who have a lot of Aries in their chart, Aries Sun, and Aries Rising. People who have Pisces Sun, Pisces Rising, you guys are going to feel the most relieved. It will be kind of a feeling of, hey Saturn, don't let the door hit you on the way out as it moves out of your sign into Aries. Now, I did mention about this false aspect between Jupiter and Saturn that's happening during this lunar phase. And this is a precursor. This is preparing us for the actual square that will happen when Jupiter goes into Cancer next month on June 15th and squares Saturn that's in Aries. It's considered a false aspect right now because Jupiter is in Gemini. Gemini is an air sign, whereas Saturn right now is in Aries, which is a fire sign. Air and fire, they get along. Fire and water, they don't. So that's what is called a false aspect, is when it's squaring off, but it's not a true square because the elements actually complement each other. So next month, on June 15th, we will have a true square. And with Mercury being in the mix with all of this, and Mercury being in its home of Gemini, it's giving us a psychological preparation for the challenges that are up ahead next month when Saturn and Jupiter actually do square off. Now, the good thing is that Jupiter is going to be going into Cancer, and it's exalted in Cancer. Jupiter loves being in Cancer, so it is going to be very much at home. However, part of the blessings that Jupiter has in Cancer are going to be hard won. The Saturn's going to make sure that we go the distance and learn all of our lessons in order for us to make our dreams a reality. And that's especially true because Saturn is conjunct Neptune. Neptune is the ruler of Pisces, where Saturn is just exiting from. And Neptune in the sign of Pisces is all about our beliefs, it's our intuition, and it's our imagination. So Mercury, that is in Gemini, is giving us a keen intellect. And as it trines Pluto, which is the planet about regeneration, it's about death and rebirth, we have almost like a 2020 vision of where we've been for really since 2020. And starting to see like how we have healed. We're starting to take stock of where we've been, and perhaps even being able to appreciate some of those challenges and some of those lessons with a new perspective now that we're on the other side of it. And then Pluto trines Saturn and Neptune, that's in Aries. And so there's this dialogue that's happening between the king of the underworld, Pluto, and time, which is Saturn. Saturn is the ruler of time and karma and of structure. So we're excavating and taking stock of the past in order to create a new plan for the future. And the way that we can do that is if we don't allow the honoring of our wounds become the wallowing of our sorrows. And luckily, now that Saturn is coming into Aries, we can make that distinction a little bit better. So this false aspect between Saturn and Jupiter is bringing us a precursor of what it is that we are going to personally need to work through in order to step into the full new chapter that will really become evident in 2026. Bits and pieces of it are going to be revealed between now and January. So that feeling of not really knowing exactly how everything is going to come together is going to be what we're going to have to face. So our egos, our identity, we like the familiar. Even if the familiar is toxic, even if the familiar is not healthy, our egos prefer the familiar to the unfamiliar, even if the unfamiliar promises more of a reward. So in order for us to deliver on this rebirthing of ourselves, there's going to be this contraction that Saturn is going to be giving to us. So much like a expecting mother will feel the contractions of this new birth before the joy of delivery, that is what we are going to be feeling with the Saturn and Jupiter square that happens next month, but we're going to be feeling the precursors to that this week. This false aspect is going to cause us to doubt our dreams, to doubt how realistic it is. And it's going to make us ask the tough question of, are you willing to go the distance to get what you want? Aries is associated with the archetype of the soldier. So if you think about the kind of training that a soldier has to go through, it's no walk in the park, right? It's boot camp, it's challenge, it's tenacity, it's grit. And that is very much how Saturn teaches us its lessons as it's in Aries. But here's the gift of what Saturn gives us in Aries. It will give us the tenacity and it will give us the endurance to go the long mile, to go the long distance. When Saturn first goes into Aries, part of the doubt that might be coming up for a lot of folks is a feeling that our aspirations have already fallen flat before they've even really begun, because Aries is about new beginnings. That is just a falsehood. It's gestating. Unlike Saturn in Pisces, where it excavates all of this stuff that needs to be worked through, but the feeling of it is so heavy that it's difficult to do so. In Aries, we do have the fire and we do have the invigoration to be able to fight the good fight as the good Aries soldier. And this new moon is not asking us to go out onto the battlefield blazing our swords and, you know, like setting the world afire just yet. Maybe that's part of your dream, and if it is, like, you know, it's coming. If we are willing to lay the groundwork, lay the foundation now. The new moon in Gemini is all about our psychological perspective. And with Pluto being in the mix with this trine that's happening, Pluto is the god of the underworld, but he's also the god of hidden treasure, because that is where the gems come from. That is where the sacred metals come from, is from under the earth. So part of also what we're seeing here with this excavation that's happening is not just the traumas, the demons, the nightmares, and the shadows, but it's also the good things, our hidden gifts, our hidden talents, perhaps the things that we're really good about that a lot of people may not know. This new moon in Gemini is giving us enhanced intuition, it's giving us enhanced communication, it's allowing us to plan and have enhanced abilities for strategy. So even though if we don't know like what going the course will completely entail, which is one of the reasons why we might fall into fear and doubt, is because we don't have the entire picture or know exactly how all the pieces are going to fall in place, we're able to at least be able to strategize how to set our course so that we can at least go into the general direction of where we need to go. So those mists of Avalon now, they're still parted, because Pisces, or the Saturn going into Pisces, it came in as a gale wind and just blew open all of the mists that perhaps were covering up pieces of ourselves that we may not have wanted to acknowledge, or parts of our lives that may not have really been working, but it was basically just too much work to acknowledge it. All of that was cleared away. And now, because we do have a clearer view, we may not be able to see past the horizon to our destination, but we do have an awareness of how to set those sails and where and how to set our compass. And that is what Gemini is inviting us to do. It's very much like that Three of Wands card in the tarot. Three of Wands is about starting a new beginning. The Two of Wands before it is about preparing that new beginning, preparing that for that new journey, packing your bag, so to speak. And in the Three of Wands, that same character now is waiting for the ship to come in. He knows where he's going to go. He doesn't know exactly what's going to happen on the journey, but he knows the direction that he's going. He's already made his decision, and now he's ready to commit to it. The astrological energies at play here are asking us to take a leap of faith in ourselves. You've already gathered enough data. You've spent the last 2.5 years in unenmeshing what works for you and what doesn't. You know which way to go. And now with the enhanced intuition that is coming into play here, and some of the things that might even come up with Pluto being the mix, things that we perhaps didn't think were available, which actually are. These are going to be hidden gifts. It's time to make those first few maneuvers. So it's time to write the business plan. It's time to put in that application. It's time to make that phone call. And on May 30th, the planet Mercury is going to be in a cazimi with the sun, which means that it's going to be aligned with the heart of the sun. May 30th, that cazimi only lasts for 1 day, so it's not going to last for very long, but it will be enough to give you a little bit of an extra boost. Mercury is totally in your corner here to make sure that not only are the mists parted, but that it's a sunny brand new day and it's full steam ahead. It's lighting the way. Do not question the maps that you have at hand in order to go on this journey. Your maps are correct. You may not know what the weather holds for you as you go beyond that horizon, but rest assured you are in the right direction. And whatever desires, whatever goals, dreams, and aspirations have been gestating for you over the last 18 months to 2.5 years, those are the things that are going to be aching to be acknowledged. And it's time to plant those seeds. It's time to take even a very small incremental step forward is still a step in the right direction. The small steps that we take now, we may not realize the ramifications that they have for our life, the ripple effect that they will take until next year or perhaps even 2 years from now. Action is how we anchor our energy, our thoughts, and our desires into reality. Without any action, our desires, our aspirations, our goals, they just stay in the realm of potential. With Mercury in your corner, you're going to be able to refine, you're going to be able to revisit, you're going to be able to have clarity on how to make the most graceful start to this new venture. Saturn in Aries teaches us what it takes to embrace independence in a world that barrages us with messages and dynamics that keep us codependent and enslaved. So if you're willing and ready to put that flare up and let the universe have a clear signal that you're ready for your best life, now is the time to truly commit to that. The things that we most fear are oftentimes the very things that are the threshold to our greatness. Times in our lives where we have the greatest fulfillment are typically also the times that we had to work through the greatest doubt and the greatest fear, and perhaps even take the greatest risks. Saturn in Aries tells us it's time to stop playing small. Saturn in Aries invites us to transcend our past, to not let our past define our future. And if at this point in time we capitulate to fear, that is potentially exactly what will happen. Oftentimes when we act of fear, we will attract the very thing that we're afraid of. So if you're afraid of failure, you're afraid of stagnation, and you're allowing that to keep you stuck, to procrastinate, and to stay frozen, then actually what is happening is you're aligning yourself with the very thing that you don't want. So fear can be kind of tricky to relate to. It can be our friend in this case because it is signaling that we're on the precipice of something great. It's what I call being nerve-sighted. But the ego hijacks fear. And fear is also the feeling that our system gives us when we're actually in danger. So the ego has this really ingenious way of keeping itself familiar and present with the illusion of control by hijacking that same response in our system as though that there's an actual danger. And that's why we have the acronym of false evidence appearing real. It doesn't mean that there's no risk. But this is the time in which the universe is telling us that we're ready to take off the training wheels. So, without further ado, let's see what the tarot might have to say about this. How can we best utilize this new moon in Gemini energy? Using a different card deck today. It's the Illuminati deck. This is a deck that's, I believe, is not in print anymore. It's my OG deck, my original deck. Felt like bringing it out today. And for those of you who are watching, set the intention that the part of this generalized reading that is most pertinent to your situation, to your life, to what it is that you're experiencing right now is going to jump out to you, and intuitively you'll know that that message is for you. Okay. All right, so we have 5 cards that came up, and 3 of them are major arcana cards. This is a big deal. Major arcana cards are the big cards like the Lover's card, the Fool, new beginnings, by the way, folks, and the Judgment card. In this case, it came up upside down. I'll talk about that in a second. So those are the big cards. Minor arcana cards are like, you know, the 2 of Swords or the 3 of Wands, things of that nature. Those are the details. Major arcana cards are big milestones. So when we have the majority of the cards that come up are major arcana cards, that tells me that this is a big deal, that there's a big milestone that is here. So the very first card that comes up is the Lover's card. Now this, it can be actual lovers, but more of the times, especially with generalized readings, this is more about transparency and communication. This is about being on the same page as another individual. It is about working together. It's about camaraderie. It's about harmony. And what I'm seeing here with the Lover's card is that I think that the things that were getting in the way of this is what we've been working through for the last 2.5 years. So we're finally at a place where we can see where we stand. We can see clearly like what it is that we need in a relationship, the kind of reciprocation that is needed, and we're in a place where we're ready to communicate that. The next cards that come up are the cards that are telling us what could get in the way with that progression now. And so we have the 5 of Pentacles. This is about loss, and both financially as well as being the outsider. So, and then the next card that comes up with this is the 2 of Cups, which is very interesting because the 2 of Cups has a lot of similar energy as the Lover's card. I mean, it's kind of, you know, you can kind of see yourself that even if you don't know the tarot, you can kind of see the similarities between the themes in this card. You have 2 people who are in love, who are in an embrace. The 2 of Cups, as you can see here with the caduceus symbol, this one, as it relates to the 5 of Pentacles, is about healing the part of ourselves that was afraid of being an outcast in order to have our own sovereignty within a relationship. So the 5 of Pentacles, you have these 2 folks who are homeless folks who are outside of the church temple. They are the outsiders. The other thing that's coming to me around this is the 5 of Pentacles is quintessentially about monetary loss. So this could be coming up for folks who this is coming up more in your career, where you're afraid of parting ways or renegotiating your relationship with your employer, with your career at large. This might even be going back to school as I get into the other cards. But there's a fear of retribution in some way, of like, you know, asking for that raise and knowing if you get denied it, that might mean that you need to go find a different employer that has better potential for growth, or you're afraid to go back to school because of the cost, or you're afraid to perhaps get married or get a divorce because of the financial repercussions of that. So money is playing a big part in the fear and the risk-taking around this new moon. But the new beginning, folks, ta-da! This is the first card in the entire deck. So we are being asked to hear the call. However, Judgment, when it's upside down, is about doubt. See, the Archangel Gabriel, he's blowing his trumpet, and you know, the folks in the graves here, they are rising again. They are hearing the call. So this part of us that lay dormant, the people in the graves here, the subconscious parts of us have woken up. And they've woken up, and there's parts of them that are excited, and there's parts of us that are like, no, I don't want to change. That's really hard. That's really difficult. There's too much risk involved. What if we fail? All of this stuff. So we are in this internal struggle between what we know the calling is. So even when the Judgment card is reversed, the calling is still there. It's not that it's not a absence of calling. It's doubt getting in the way or making us hear the calling a little bit fuzzy. But still, there's a calling for a new beginning. There's a calling to, and the Fool card is literally the leap of faith that it takes to start a new chapter. He's literally jumping off a cliff into the unknown. This is our tarot skydiver. And when I went skydiving, and I was only given 45 minutes to prepare for this. It was a surprise from my sister for my bachelorette. And so I was getting married, and my sister thought that this was like a perfect analogy for getting married, and she was quite right. It was actually a good thing that I only had 45 minutes to mentally prepare for this like huge, scary risk that I was taking. Because if I had given myself days to think about it, I may not have done it. And it was one of the most freeing, most empowering things I'd ever done. Now, when I was sitting in that little plane going up, and I realized what I was about to do, I started freaking out. I started thinking like, no, I started to try to gaslight myself and tell my brain that, statistically speaking, the drive over here was more dangerous than jumping out of this plane. And my brain was like, yeah, sorry, not having it. I don't believe you. Like the very truth of the matter is that you might die today. And when I accepted that, and I asked myself, if I were to die today, would I have a lot of regrets? And the answer came back was like, no, I've lived a pretty good life. I've lived pretty true to myself, and I've accomplished a lot for the short life that I've had. And when that came back, there was like a peace that came over me. There was still a little bit of nervousness, but I wasn't on the edge of having a panic attack anymore, and I was able to enjoy the experience. So Mercury is in our corner, which stimulates us intellectually. But because we have Pluto and Neptune all in with this as well, I think it's asking us more to go into the parts of our intellect that is intuitive, the part of us that already has the answers, versus overanalyzing. So just like I was in the plane and I allowed myself the freedom to jump into the unknown, if I were to had given myself the opportunity to overanalyze it, that experience may never have happened. I don't typically tell people to jump before they think, but in this particular case, I think that the changes that are happening are things that we've already contemplated and perhaps have already started, and that we're being asked to continue that momentum. This is one of those times in which I will say that we will probably do better if we do more and think less. If you have found this video helpful or entertaining, then please hit the like and subscribe button. That helps out more than you know. And if you like to make sure that you never miss a video, an event, or if you're interested in the upcoming classes such as Quantum Reiki, as well as the new Turn Your Sensitivity into Strength that we are in the process right now of the very first class, it's going to be launching again in August, then sign up for the newsletter. Link is both below. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.